Welcome to yet another episode of the Valley of Wisdom podcast. आज हमारे साथ एक ऐसी हस्ती हैं जिन्होंने कश्मीर के एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप सेक्टर को बहुत ही ज़्यादा कंट्रीब्यूट अपनी तरफ से किया है और जिनकी अब ये कोशिश है कि कश्मीर के ग्रास रूट्स में ये कितना ज़्यादा अपनी पर्सनल और प्रोफेशनल कैपेसिटी में कंट्रीब्यूट करें. We have none other than Waseem Bashir with us. Waseem, a very warm welcome to our podcast.
Shukriya. Thank you so much for having me.
It's such a pleasure. तो वसीम, let's start from the very basics, right? क्या आपने सोचा था कभी कि आप entrepreneurship ऐसी कोई जर्नी लेंगे? और ये जो थॉट आया entrepreneurship का, क्या ये बचपन से था? हमको थोड़ा सा एक आइडिया दे दीजिए कि ये जो बचपन की आपकी जर्नी रही है, जो इस सेक्टर में फिर मॉफ हुई, आप entrepreneurship के लिए गए, आप एजुकेशन शायद आपने बाहर की है, थोड़ा बहुत उस जर्नी के बारे में हमें बताएं.
Sure. So first of all, I think important है कि मेरा background. So I came from a business background. मेरे granddad, he was a businessman. My father, he's a businessman. So for me, it was like a very normal trajectory कि मैं business के बारे में ही सोचूं. But at the same time, I realized when I was in Kashmir, I want to do something of my own. And that's when I left. But I want to go back first, which is I had the privilege to study in Burnhall School. And then I studied in Bisco School. And at that point, I realized I had a flair for computers. I loved computers. Everything about computers. Ye tha ye around 1997. I remember we used to have Logo as a language or Basic as a language taught at school.
Correct.
और उस time में I used to love everything about it. And मुझे तभी लगा कि there's something about it that I enjoyed more than anybody else.
And how old were you when we're talking about this?
I think about 12.
12. Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I asked, thankfully, हमारे cousins थे. He's still in computers. He's called Nice Computers. And he was the first one who introduced a personal computer in Kashmir.
Wow.
And then my dad took me there and we bought a computer. And back then it was like a huge thing because
Correct.
It was like in white and it was like a spaceship.
Right.
I remember playing with it day in, day out. And I realized then that I want to do something in this. And then afterwards, like internet came. That was revolutionary. And I think at that point, I realized I want to pursue this as a career. And eventually, I ended up doing masters in software engineering from University of Manchester.
Amazing. तो मैं थोड़ा सा डीप जाना चाहूँगा इस जर्नी में. आपने कहा आपने बर्नहॉल से पढ़ा है, फिर आप बिस्को गए. हाउ वाज स्कूल फॉर यू? क्या इकोसिस्टम ऐसा था जो आपको पुश कर रहा था टुवर्ड्स कंप्यूटर्स, और वाज इट जस्ट योर पर्सनल aspiration to get into this domain?
I think it was personally me, but although at the same time, thankfully, I was in Burnhall. So I had the privilege.
Right.
And my dad, thankfully, he was a guy who used to always support my decisions. So even before a computer, I had a digital notebook. So I used to enter like my daily journal in a Casio diary. So usne agar wo fulfill nahi kiya hota, maybe, things would have been different. But thankfully, in the year 1996, we got introduced to computers at school. So agar main kisi aur school mein hota, maybe not. And then I realized this was the calling for me. So those two things played a pivotal role. But I remember one more thing, because I wasn't, I would say, the best student in the class. Like, I didn't study a lot, but I was the best in terms of making sure I was in the right positions. So I was the school monitor for about 6 years, ended up being the school captain for 2 years. So I really enjoyed that position. And somehow I felt that I had to take more responsibility as a student. And I remember one example where
Right.
एक हमारी जो teacher थी, she selected some random guys as like the monitor and the assistant monitor, and I actually reached out to her and I said, on what basis have you selected these two guys? So
Okay.
at that, now when I realized that was a big move actually,
Right.
because I didn't know this teacher well, और मैं उनके पास उनको challenge कर रहा हूँ उनका decision. So I think somehow I challenge the norm.
I think one of the most important aspects of the education, especially in the early childhood, is also the family that you come from, the environment that you're in. और आपने अभी बताया कि आपकी ग्रैंडफादर जो थे वो भी बिजनेस में थे, आपके फादर, और आपको एक ऐसा चाइल्डहुड मिला है जो आपको कहाँ बहुत ही ज़्यादा सपोर्ट मिला है अपनी फैमिली से, राइट? तो वहाँ की एजुकेशन कैसी थी? अपने घर की एजुकेशन कैसी थी? आपके वैल्यूज़ कैसे थे? आपने छोटा मोटा एग्जाम्पल दिया अभी कि आपके लिए ये पहले से डिजिटल कॉपी थी, हर किसी के पास ये एक्सेस नहीं था. सो हाउ इम्पोर्टेंट वॉज द रोल ऑफ योर फैमिली एंड वट एक्सपेक्टेशन डिड दे हैव फ्रॉम यू? वॉज देयर कि उस टाइम पे, स्पेशली इफ यू रिमेंबर, इट वॉज आइदर यू गो इनटू इंजीनियरिंग और यू गो टू मेडिकल, राइट? सो somehow your family came from that different background of business. How did that translate to you getting into this direction?
So that's a good question. Actually, jo mere dad hai, he still believes that if he has like 20 sons, they will end up in business because
all 20 of them.
Yeah. He thinks that business is the ultimate kind of position to be in. But he has a different view of business. But the core values, I think that's an important subject to me because I believe that is what makes the difference. जैसे मैंने अपने डैड को देखा, he was the perfect role model for me. वो होता है ना कि as a kid you idolize your father. He was exactly that. I used to idolize him because he was fair. He's I think the best person I know when it comes to charity, when it comes to sharing stuff. So even today I talk to him, although he has never read any business books. But I've read so many business books, and then I go back to him and he tells me a concept and which he has experienced from his life, and it mimics a famous author. So that proves that somehow he has learned all these lessons through his life. And those were the things which I experienced as a kid.
So he's the street entrepreneur, as you may call
100%,
it, right?
100%.
And obviously, so with such an ecosystem and with such a support system, you then went on and you did your bachelor's and then your master's. So where did you do your bachelor's?
So yeah, that's a good question. So in Kashmir, there were not many business computer schools.
Correct.
In 2002. We had one next door, Cassett College. And my dad was like, well, why don't you do a degree there and you can help me in my business? Because he always wanted me to come back to his business. Uska ye tha ki, eventually we have this huge business. Who's going to support the whole system?
And was the idea also ki computers, information technology, internet, this is going to shape the world going further? Somehow it would help us on the business aspect? Was that?
Maybe that wasn't his probably vision at that time because it was too early. Us time mujhe yaad hai, we bought up in 2003 KashmirBazaar.com.
Oh yeah.
With Junaid, Arjun Nasir and Sabah.
Right.
And then we set up the store called KashmirBazaar.com. And Junaid was in America then. And we thought like this is the first e-commerce. It was too early back then, to be honest. At that time, nobody knew e-commerce kya hai. And now...
So Junaid is Junaid Mattu.
Yes, Junaid Mattu. So we are obviously, we were classmates.
Right.
So Nasir Ali Khan, me and Junaid, we set up the store. But it ended up, in a different story. But वहाँ पे उस time वो realization नहीं थी कि IT उसको कहाँ ले जाएगा, especially internet.
Absolutely. Okay. So you did your education then with Cassett?
Yes. So I was in 3 years in Cassett. But I want to share this.
Please.
There was one teacher there, Athar Saab, and he was the one who unlocked my brain. Until then, I don't even think कि मैं कभी सोचता था life में. I didn't even realize that I was a human or an amoeba or like whatever. So he was the one who challenged me for the first time. And I think that is the calling because उनने मेरे को tech का वो side दिखाया जहाँ पे you had to like really think. So I remember he used to give me problems and I had to solve those problems on paper, not on computers. So that meant I had to use my brain. And after that, I was in love with computers.
I mean, this is very important. And, we have done some podcasts in the last few weeks. And one thing that is coming back consistently is that somehow or the other, there is one person or an event in life which shapes your journey going forward, right? And I think mentorship इसमें बहुत ही ज़्यादा बड़ा role play करता है. So, I mean, he was your first mentor, so to speak, in terms 100%. Of that domain in computer sciences, right? And उसके बाद जो journey गई, I think एक और चीज़ मैं इसमें पहले ऐड करना चाहूँगा कि mentorship से या हमारी एजुकेशन सिस्टम में भी अगर आपके कोई टीचर है तो आपने बहुत अच्छा पॉइंट यहाँ पे ऐड किया जिसको मैं थोड़ा सा फर्दर एक्सप्लेन करना चाहूँगा हमारी ऑडियंस को कि एक मेंटर का एक या एजुकेटर का काम आपको सिखाना नहीं है, उनका काम आपको ये सिखाना है कि सोचना क्या है और कैसे है. ये जो इनकलकेट होता है थॉट प्रोसेस, आई थिंक दैट इज द डिफरेंस बिटवीन people who go really successful in their life, और others जो कि सिर्फ फॉलो करते हैं एक सेट पैटर्न, स्टेप 1 स्टेप 2 स्टेप 3. आपको कितना लगता है कि ये एक इंसान की और स्पेशली एक सक्सेसफुल इंसान की जर्नी में इम्पोर्टेंट है?
I think you have to meet the right people, and I don't know how to make that happen. But मेरा उसूल ये है कि you push yourself, you know,
Right.
wherever there is opportunity, you grab it. क्योंकि तभी you build your own luck.
Correct.
Otherwise, if you don't even go there, or if you don't make an effort, how will that happen? जैसे मैं इधर आज बैठा हूँ, it's not by luck, you know.
Right.
It was because there were opportunities, and I met the right people, I made the right effort, and of course there's divine intervention, but that is only when you put the hard work in.
Absolutely.
You know, otherwise that's just pure luck. जैसे कोई lottery लेता है. But most of the times it's hard work in the right direction and then taking chances.
And through this mentorship, I think once it did unlock you, then the journey of getting out of Kashmir.
Yes.
So what you did was not just get out of Kashmir, but you actually went ahead and you then go out of mainland India, and I think it was Europe where you did your masters.
I ended up in University of Manchester, but that's a good story as well, because
how did that happen? Yes, please.
मैं गया था Delhi because I had this understanding कि most of the tech happens in the US.
Right.
तो मुझे लगा था मैं Microsoft जाऊंगा. That was my ultimate goal, you know, joining Microsoft, because at that point मेरी लाइफ का वही एक मकसद था.
आप जब एक कंप्यूटर सिस्टम ऑन करते हैं, आप देखते हैं माइक्रोसॉफ्ट ऑफिस या माइक्रोसॉफ्ट विंडोज 98 XP, you know, somehow subconsciously that is the ultimate.
Yes, exactly.
That is.
So जब मैं दिल्ली गया, वहाँ पे मैंने realize किया कि first of all, I come from an education system जहाँ पे I had like 67 percentage. And I had 100% percentile.
Wow.
But that didn't count. Nobody cared कि students कितने थे, क्या हुआ था. आपकी percentage पे count होता था. And they clearly told me, with this percentage, you can't join any US college. So, funnily, I was actually in Bangalore after that, because मैंने सोचा था मैं GRE के लिए तैयारी करूँगा. And I get a call from these consultancy companies, and they said, Manchester University is in Bangalore these days. Why don't you visit them? Their cutoff percentage was 85%. So मैं वहाँ गया. So this is the point where I say, you know, taking that opportunity and just going and pushing for it. I took my laptop, but I also took my USB stick, जिसमें मेरा project था 3 साल का. So I went there, and luckily the head of computer science was there. जबकि usually delegates में different लोग आते हैं.
Correct.
इस type पे वो आए थे. His name was David, and I spoke to him and I told him the story about my percentage. And then he said, "What have you done in your, you know, dissertation, your college project?" I had the USB stick, so I put it in. I gave them a presentation, और उनके साथ computer science की security teacher भी थी.
Wow.
So she liked the whole idea of what I built.
What was the, if I may ask?
It was a database management system.
Nice.
A very technical thing.
Okay.
So they loved the project, and they gave me like an unconditional offer to study in University of Manchester.
That is absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
So you're saying that you did not make the cutoff.
No.
If you would have gone through the traditional route, but just the love that you had for your domain, then divinity happens, right? So divine intervention helps you with that regard. It's a beautiful journey, right? It's a beautiful story. And how did you end up? How was the experience there?
Yeah.
And I'm sure that there must have been some dynamic with the family also. आपके father चाहते थे कि somehow आप business में करें, लेकिन अब आप जा रहे थे उस direction में, Manchester में. तो how was that dynamic? How was the journey there? And how did it fit in with the journey that your father wanted you to have?
So thankfully, my father, he supported my journey, but he said always that I'm going to end up doing his business. You know, he was like, ab jao wahan pe. Eventually you have to do what we are doing in Kashmir, like maybe publish more of our products there, or like advertise them there. So उनका वो गर्ज था, लेकिन मैं यहाँ से अपने गर्ज के लिए जा रहा था.
Right.
So I ended up in the university, and it was really like a shock, because मेरा, अब सोचो, मेरे लिए the only journey I made was cross the road. मैं करानगर में रहता हूँ. I had to cross the road. That was college for me for 3 years.
Wow.
And now I'm studying in one of the best universities in the world. Or now I'm studying with the topmost people from different countries. That was a shock. I actually had anxiety. So I actually went to the doctor, and they said, you should take beta blockers, which thankfully I didn't.
Wow.
So that was an experience. That was a challenge. That was putting yourself in that difficult position. But you eventually, with the right amount of grit, you come across and make sure that you not just like survive, but you actually win.
This reminds me of one of the experiences I had with one of my very dearest friends who comes from IIT Bombay. He's a dropout, and he came from a very, very small village in somewhere in Madhya Pradesh. So the interesting anecdote he shared with me once was कि जब मेरा सिलेक्शन IIT बॉम्बे में हुआ तो पता नहीं 50 या 60 गांव में से मैं एक ऐसा लड़का था जो वहां पे जाके सिलेक्ट हुआ था एंड आई बिकेम एन ओवरनाइट सेलिब्रिटी. तो बहुत बहुत दूर से गांव से इधर से मैं टीवी पे आने लगा एंड पीपल स्टार्टेड फ्लॉकिंग टू देयर होम कि ये क्या है, ये कौन है ये बच्चा जिसने आईआईटी क्रैक किया, क्योंकि आईआईटी इन दोस डेज वाज अ बिग डील, इट स्टिल इज, राइट? एंड one thing that changed my perspective also about education was that he said after all of this, when he came back and then he joined his university, he was in his first class, IIT Bombay का पहला क्लास था उनका. तो एक जो उनके टीचर थे वहां पे, तो उन्होंने एक इंटरेस्टिंग एक्टिविटी बोला बच्चों को करने के लिए. What he said is just look at your right and spend 10 seconds and look at your left and spend 10 seconds. And what I want to make you understand कि जो तुम स्पेशल थे, तुमने लाखों लोगों में से अब तुम्हारा सिलेक्शन हुआ है, वो कल तक था. तुम्हारे राइट में भी वही इंसान है जो उसी जर्नी के थ्रू आया है, तुम्हारे लेफ्ट में भी वही इंसान है जो उसी जर्नी के थ्रू आया है. आज की डेट में अब तुम स्पेशल नहीं रहे एंड जो भी जर्नी आपकी जाएगी, जो स्ट्रगल्स आपके जाएंगे, वो सबके सेम है, राइट? सो सिमिलरली इन द यूके इट वाज अ सिमिलर एक्सपीरियंस फॉर यू, राइट? एंड हाउ डिड दैट टाइम, how did you spend that time? What projects were you working on? Did you try and बहुत सारे students ऐसे भी होते हैं, and I'm trying to get it for the audience also, कि वहाँ यूनिवर्सिटी में अगर किसी को स्कॉलरशिप मिलती है या पार्टली स्कॉलरशिप मिलती है, हर किसी के पास वो बैकग्राउंड नहीं है पैसे का कि वो सपोर्ट कर सके एजुकेशन को. तो बहुत सारे स्टूडेंट्स पैरेलल में इधर उधर छोटे मोटे दे डू दीज जॉब्स अपने आप को सपोर्ट करने के लिए. Was that the case with you? Or
while I was studying, thankfully my dad financially supported my cause. But 2008 when I graduated, उसी time recession हो गया, with the first proper recession, and nobody was hiring. और यहाँ से हमारे कश्मीर में भी issues हो रहे थे. That was like the first time we had ragdo and all those things. So I was in that position where I had to decide, shall I strive now to stay in the UK or let me try what I can do? Kashmir was not an idea at that time. So मैं UK में ही रहा, and I started now working part-time, but it's now properly looking for a job. मेरा अब aim था कि I'm going to start looking for a role in IT. That was the case because I went to London and वहाँ पे बहुत सारे financial companies hai. When I was passing through, I saw this huge building and I was like, I want to work here. Until then, I wasn't pretty sure कि मैं UK में रहूँ या नहीं. But I wanted to then be part of that ecosystem. And eventually, yes, I got a job and ended up working in different roles, especially started from a junior developer to a business analyst to a project manager to a business intelligence developer until 2015.
So help me understand something. So once you graduated out of college, you had the opportunity to either work with the leading companies, maybe transition into that Microsoft role that you always had in mind, or maybe work in smaller startups. Which one did you choose and what was the background?
Yeah, that's true. That's a good question, Wade, because at that time you just want to work in an environment where you get a lot of experience.
Correct.
क्योंकि मेरे को आइडिया भी नहीं था, टू बी ऑनेस्ट, एक कॉर्पोरेट कल्चर में होता क्या है. I was from Kashmir. Kashmir has no idea of professionalism. Not at that time, I won't say now. Things are different now. उस टाइम पे I didn't even know कि सूट पहनना क्या होता है to go to work, every single day. And then you had a manager who was your line manager, and everything went through that person. And then you had a team of people working with you closely, and the dynamics of that team, because they're not all from London. One guy is from Poland. He's Polish, and the other one is from South Africa. So this diverse culture in one team, and to navigate that and to ensure that you are productive as well, and also you're learning on the job, because Kashmir mein jis culture se aaya tha, I was like, oh, somebody's going to teach me something, I was like, oh, ye mere ko task diya hai, somebody's going to come and tell me how to do it.
Right.
But nobody gave me any advice. They was like, here's the project, figure it out. And that was the mindset, the first kind of kick, which was you have to figure it out yourself.
And how important do you think that is in terms of proceeding further in your career?
Yeah, I think that's a very important concept. जैसे हमने बोला ना, टीचर्स का 2 रोल हो सकता है, या फिर वो सिखाएं आपको कि कैसे करना है, या फिर वो खुद उस स्टूडेंट लेवल पे आपकी हेल्प करें.
Correct.
I think as a parent now, I realize that if I tell my daughter that this is the solution, she won't learn, of course. But if I tell her, here's the problem, here are the different ways of solving this problem, and then she can choose the path which she wants to, but still uses some part of her brain to figure it out, that is what real education is.
Right.
और वहाँ पे मैंने realize किया कि that is something I want to cultivate in Kashmir.
So as they say, teach them fishing instead of giving them a fish, right?
Correct.
So that's beautiful, right? And उसके बाद ये जर्नी कहीं ना कहीं फिर मॉर्फ होती है into entrepreneurship, right? That was a beautiful journey in itself. And I would now like to invite Farhat, who would take this conversation of entrepreneurship with you forward. But it was a pleasure meeting you, and we hope that this conversation gives a lot of insight to our community. And we look forward to hosting you again.
Thanks, mate.
Thank you.
Welcome back, dear friends. What you do not know about Waseem Bashir is that he is CEO at Picture, and he makes landing pages, web design, and a lot of related things. And he has clients across the globe. And his clients are so dedicated that they sometimes fly over from Los Angeles to Kashmir.
Yeah.
So, Waseem, as an entrepreneur, as a CEO, how has this journey been? How did it start? Entrepreneurship के कीड़े ने आपको कब काटा?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Farhad, because eventually, as I said to Mohit, I was happy in this position where I ended up doing this job. Lekin ek din I realized like this can't be the end of my life, you know, doing the same journey in the tube. I don't know, yahan pe just whenever you go to whenever you commute, you usually take your own car. You go from one place to another place. But in London, mostly people take the tube.
Exactly. And then in Delhi, you know, we have this metro and all.
Exactly. So at that time, I started reading listening to a lot of books. And wahan pe I realized that I can't just do this every single day, you know. So one day I woke up and then realized this is it. So I'm going to leave my job and focus on building my own agency. But that was interesting because now I have 5 years of my experience and I met amazing people.
Right.
And I met the best managers on the planet,
Fair
really. And they were so considerate. So I never actually worked in India. So I never knew ki India ka work culture kya hai. So I wanted to cultivate that kind of style in Kashmir. And in 2015, I left my job. Or wahan pe my wife, she started her job, and then for the first year, I was taking care of my daughter.
Okay.
And working from my
You were at
bedroom.
home?
Yes.
Okay.
I was working from home for the first year. Or usi time pe I started hiring in Kashmir.
Okay.
And started forming this team, which we now call the Dream Team. Or abhi bhi I have people from 2015 with me. So it was an amazing point because I started giving them a lot of time because I realized that's the biggest commodity,
right,
you know, which I can offer them. So वहीं से journey start हुई.
मुझे मैं एक चीज़ ना जब भी मैं आपसे बात करता हूँ, I realize this about you कि आप you are about systems, you are about, you know, going into the analysis of it and understanding things really deep. So वो कहाँ से आई वो बात?
While working in different companies, I realized big companies only work with systems. Especially, to just summarize or give a very simple example, McDonald's. McDonald's, if you see, there's a 16-year-old working behind the till or like a 30-year-old working behind the till. But every time you order as a customer, आपके पास जो French fries आती है वो exactly वैसी आती है जैसे किसी और restaurant में मिलेगी. That's not just in India or Kashmir or anywhere else. It's across the world. So how did that happen? You know, it's only because they have systems, and everybody flies, you know, a commercial as a commercial passenger. But every time you see, there's a pilot ticking off a checklist with paper and pen, and they're ticking off boxes. So you realize these systems, once in place, anybody can run them.
Right.
You know. So वहाँ पे मेरे को वो आया, and then I have a business partner. He's German, and because of his German experience, he has taught me so much. जो मैंने आज तक life में, until I was like, I met him 2017. I never met anyone like him.
I've heard they're very rude and they're very blunt. Not
rude, but they're very direct, but they're very honestly blunt. You know, it's like if things are wrong, things are wrong. They don't sugarcoat it in a different way. They will just call it out. It's difficult sometimes for people like us from Kashmir, which always tie everything to emotions. कि हमको लगता है कि इसने मेरे को डांटा है, इसका मतलब होगा कि इसको मैं अच्छा नहीं लगता हूँ. जबकि they don't care about you as a person, but I mean, they don't care, but they don't, at that moment of time, they focus on performance,
Right.
your work ability, not you as a person. So we have to keep those things separate. Like in Kashmir, we kind of mix them together. So that's why we emotionally think.
So मतलब हमें प्रोफेशनल और जो पर्सनल लाइफ है उसको कहीं ना कहीं we have to keep them separated.
Not,
and we don't have
it's
to
like you have to think कि ये मुझे कुछ बोल रहा है, इसका मकसद क्या है?
Right.
Is he like teaching me or pushing me
right.
or challenging me to improve my skill, or is he just like bluntly mocking me?
Okay.
They would never do that. They would never bluntly mock you. They would criticize your work, not you as a person.
And then now that you talk about numbers और बहुत सारे numbers, you go through them and, you know, you have made a lot of these goals for yourself, and a lot of them are in numbers. So लेकिन दूसरे end पे मैं देखता हूँ you're a person of relationships. You're a person who values family. ये जो numbers और your family के बीच में जो सारा emotional aspect है life के, how do you navigate them?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. It's not easy. It's definitely not easy because life pulls you in one direction, and then there's your emotional side, your metaphysical side or philosophical side. That pulls you in a different direction.
So true.
So I think it's a matter of balance. I believe in the term ihsan in Islam, which is, you know, reaching your best possible self in a way. So how do you see yourself?
Right.
And that's what I believe in. It does sometimes mean I have to like think, am I going too materialistic by chasing numbers?
Right.
But at the same time, am I not giving enough time to my family?
Wow.
That has to be balanced. But overall, yes, you've got to be mindful.
I'm reminded of this study, which is one of the longest longitudinal study in the world. इसको ग्रांट स्टडी कहते हैं, और ग्रांट स्टडी लगभग 80 साल की स्टडी है. इट स्टार्टेड इन 1938 एंड 4 डायरेक्टर उसके चेंज हो चुके हैं अभी तक. एंड दे डिड दिस स्टडी अबाउट हार्वर्ड में स्टडी हुई, एंड दे डिड दिस अबाउट, यू नो, हार्वर्ड के जो स्टूडेंट्स हैं और फिर बाहर के भी कुछ स्टूडेंट्स को उन्होंने जोड़ा उसमें, कि ज़िंदगी में एक इंसान को क्या चाहिए टू लिव अ हैप्पी लाइफ, who lives the most content and happy life in the world. और फिर क्योंकि 80 साल तक चली, so they did not just वहाँ पे उस टाइम जो उनके रिसर्च का पार्ट थे, उनके फिर बच्चे हुए, फिर बच्चों के बच्चे हुए इन 80 सालों में. एंड वन थिंग, एक रिजल्ट जो उसमें बड़ा कंसिस्टेंट है, इट इज़ दैट मोर दैन योर करियर, मोर दैन वेर यू रीच, और आपको पता है हार्वर्ड के स्टूडेंट्स दे समटाइम्स बिकम, यू नो, दे रीच द टॉप मोस्ट पोजिशंस इन द वर्ल्ड. मोर दैन ऑल दैट, इट्स रिलेशनशिप्स.
Yeah.
Which really matter in life, and I think we need to understand it, we need to appreciate it, and we need to do more about it. What is it, anything special you do to keep your family intact? And I've had these conversations with you. You talk about your daughter, and I am father to a daughter, so how do you navigate that relationship, and what are you doing special?
I think I spend a lot of time with her, and also मैं उसको treat करता हूँ as a whatever a year old she is. So if she was 3-year-old, I would treat her as a 3-year-old. मैं उसको ऐसे treat नहीं करूँगा like she's either too like mature or neither she's like a kid or a baby. So right now she's 9, so we can talk about things, but we can also do goofy stuff.
Right.
So
goofy in what sense?
Like play games, play hide and seek, like do things which she enjoys, because I know for sure she's going to grow and eventually she will, you know, not do this anymore. True. And I will miss that as a parent. True. So I'm trying to enjoy every moment of that as much as possible.
This is beautiful. You know, I was reading about it कि up to जैसे 9 or 10, this is the age when kids start having these, you know, they start developing friendships outside, and as a parent, you are not the first priority anymore. So you get replaced, and ये जो critical time है आपने बहुत अच्छे से गुजारा है.
Yeah, I mean, for the first 2 years she was with me, or the first year she was fully with me, and then जब वो थोड़ी बड़ी होती गई, फिर वो nursery गई, school गई, but still I managed to spend time with her.
And then there is a lot of stigma, you know, when you talk about parenting.
Yeah.
You see, औरतों के साथ हम expect करते हैं कि वो सब कुछ करें parenting में. And as men, okay, हमारी कुछ expectations हैं कि we have to go out, we have to, you know, arrange for the family. But then you are not, as a society, इसको कुछ अच्छा नहीं देखा जाता कि बाप टाइम स्पेंड कर रहा है बच्चों के साथ. How do you see that?
I think that depends, क्योंकि मैं UK में हूँ. For there it's like a partnership, and partnership doesn't mean 50-50.
Okay.
It means 100. You know,
Wow.
so
Beautiful.
you're like giving everything,
Uh-huh.
and you don't expect anything.
Uh-huh.
जब आप 100% दे रहे हो किसी चीज को without expecting much,
Right.
then it makes you happy if something happens. You know,
Uh-huh.
there a child or a father or mother, they are equal parents.
Right.
Of course, there's psychological or physical needs for a baby towards the mother. Like eventually, as a father, I believe you build deep relationship with your kids if you spend more time. नहीं तो मतलब what's the point? You know, they will grow up very quickly. You will miss that time, and then you will one day realize they're now 20, 30.
Right.
How would you appreciate that time if you don't spend time with them?
That's so true. And the first 5 years are very critical in a child's development.
Yeah.
And most of the neural networks and most of these, connections, most of the understanding that that a person develops is in the first 5 years of one's life.
Yeah, and the value system for it.
Exactly.
Like, it's basically how me as a person, am I treating my wife? मैं उसको कैसे treat कर रहा हूँ? My daughter is watching every second of it,
Oh, right.
and she will build her own value system based on that. So in Kashmir, we sometimes don't think about it. जैसे हम बच्चे होते हैं सामने, उनके सामने झगड़ा करते हैं या उनको कोई मोबाइल थमा देते हैं. So we don't think of them as like humans who are eventually going to grow and have their own way of looking at things. We just discard them because we think like they're kids. You know, they don't understand anything.
Right.
But actually they do.
Yeah,
and they're soaking up
developing.
everything.
Exactly. And it is the age जब वो सबसे ज़्यादा समझ रहे होते हैं चीज़ों को. They are making sense of the world around them.
Yeah.
It's so important. But इस सब में ना, I want to understand it because you have been in Kashmir. You have an exposure of the Western world. मैं समझना चाहता हूँ कि ये जो social media या all this mobile phone usage, ये सब बच्चों में, क्योंकि I've seen kids getting addicted to it and there is no mechanism in place, and you're someone who thinks a lot and who is into analysis and all. So have you implemented any of that thought process into आपको अपनी बच्ची को क्या देना है, or how do you deal with that as a parent?
It's a very tough thing because ऐसा नहीं है कि हम perfect है, but we are trying to achieve balance there as well. जैसे Hannah, she is given specific screen time. We call it screen time.
Okay.
Screen time across different devices, whether she's watching television or mobile. No, she doesn't actually use mobile, but if she's using a tablet, that's screen time. So we made a conscious decision कि हम अपने बच्चे को कुछ चीज थमा नहीं देंगे to shut her up. Because usually what happens, जैसे मैं यहाँ देखता हूँ, people are tired. They don't want to play with their kids. They just say, oh, take this. And then the kid is like, कहीं पे कोने में बैठा है, watching stuff like day in, day out. So what does that imply? That actually implies your child actually wants your attention.
Obviously.
You know?
Obviously.
So agar you leave everything else, when you go home, you spend time with them, they won't need screen time.
True. So true.
Screen time is like एक bandage जैसा, so that you're like covering that wound. But actually, as a parent, if you spend time with them, then
that's what they require.
Yeah, that's it. You solve the problem.
They see connection.
So you don't actually you don't actually focus on the screen. You focus on yourself. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing as a parent? Are you spending time with them? Reading books with them, stuff like that.
I have, you somehow आपने इसको बहुत अच्छे से summarize किया. With my daughter, initially, my parents started giving her phone and she started getting addicted to it, the way the phones, these videos and these games are made. So I realized early on that there is something, she prefers over the phone. It is spending time with me.
Of course.
And then what I would do is, I got all these, I got footballs, these balls and all, I got balloons and all the other things. I started playing with her. And we were able to replace वाला उसका जो screen time वाला time है, we were able to replace it completely. और वो बिल्कुल भी उसकी dependence नहीं रही फिर phones पे. And what हमने additionally एक चीज़ और की, we did not give her any tabs or any small, the smartphones. हमने एक screen रखी वहाँ, और उसी पे if she has to watch something, because there is a certain side of technology that we should acknowledge. कि हमारे यहाँ technology में there are amazing things that are happening. Smartphone is not a problem. you not knowing how to use this is a problem.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it doesn't come with a manual. So
exactly.
They say my daughter, she sees me. I don't have Instagram on my phone, Facebook, Twitter, or any social media apps. I don't have notifications on.
Okay.
So if somebody messages me, I don't see a notification because I've disabled them all.
Right.
So uska ye matlab hai ki anything happens, somebody's going to give me a call.
Right.
You know.
Right.
So that also means ki WhatsApp ki jo bhi notifications I don't get them. So she has seen that and she realizes I don't get disturbed too much. But of course, I'm not saying I'm perfect, but at least I'm trying to improve my own, relationship with my phone. Hopefully, she will learn from that.
I think this is a beautiful life lesson. We have to be role models of our kids. We are the role models, whether we believe it or not.
Yeah, of course.
So, अब इससे हम आगे बढ़ते हैं थोड़ा. And I want to understand from you your relationship with books. You know, you say they have helped you navigate your life. They have helped you become a better entrepreneur. They have helped you in your personal life. Tell us about books and which are some of the top books that you would want me to read or the audience to read.
I think it comes with a problem, Farhad. Like, I won't recommend a book because it doesn't mean कि ये वैसी situation है जिसमें you just read for fun. I believe in a problem-solving approach. So imagine if you are not good with the phone, try to find the best book about phone addiction.
Okay.
Read it. It'll help you improve it. If you don't know how to manage your finances, read the best book out there on how to manage your finances.
Right.
So with books, I think the problem is when I talk to students here, like in Kashmir, हम बोलते हैं कि हमारे पास टाइम नहीं बुक्स की वजह से या people are already so consumed by social media जैसे उनको लगता है कि वो जो summary है of a book that's good enough.
Yeah,
but
it never is good enough.
Exactly. It's like, for example, eating. When you eat Chinese food or Wazwan or some other flavor, you don't then appreciate कि आपको क्या अच्छा लगता है until you don't read like 10-20 books.
That's true.
उसके बाद आपको पता चलेगा कि मुझे क्या अच्छा लगता है.
So true.
And the other relationship with books is you have to read a book with different maturity levels. Just say when you're 21, you will read a book, you might get a meaning or value out of it. But when you read it at 31, 41, there'll be a different meaning. So don't think of a book, you have to read it from page by page, from start to end. Just think of it as a library in your home. You take a book, you read a few pages, you finish, you leave it.
So
but you
true.
and the important thing is, it goes into your subconscious mind. Not directly conscious.
It changes you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And suddenly, let's say I'm in a situation where I need a particular solution. मैंने कोई book पढ़ी है उस पे, and then subconsciously I will realize, okay, this is the point where I can use that idea.
So true.
So think of books just for building your mind. Don't necessarily think of like it's going to solve my problem tomorrow. So that will be my approach. So I won't even pinpoint on a book because
this is beautiful. So Nawal Ravikant has a similar understanding. So he talks about books as these. He does not read books cover to cover. Some he does, but largely he.
And when I read his book, I realized that somehow we are on the same page because I was reading the books in the same way. मैं gym जाता था, मेरे पास audiobook है के, and I was listening to it. But in the car, I used to listen to another book. But I was like, am I flipping too much? But then when he said that he's doing the same thing, I said, oh, maybe this is normal.
And it makes more sense because बहुत सारे जो मेरे mentees हैं, students हैं, या generally मैं देखता हूँ मेरे colleagues वगैरह, there is a guilt. बहुत सारे लोगों में गिल्ट में देखता हूँ. They get books और साल के पहले क्योंकि अब नया साल शुरू हो रहा है, they'll get all the books in the world, they'll put them on the shelves and then they will have this guilt कि मैंने कुछ नहीं पढ़ा. So it's better to look at it from the perspective कि okay, you're always going to buy more books than you read. पहली चीज. Then if you see आप एक क्यूरियोसिटी वाले माइंडसेट से यू स्टार्ट सीइंग एक प्रॉब्लम का मैं सोल्यूशन कहाँ से ढूंढूं, देन गेट द बेस्ट बुक पॉसिबल अबाउट इट एंड देन रीड इट, मे बी रीड 50 पेजेस ऑफ इट और एक पॉडकास्ट देख लो साथ, और दैट्स हाउ यू अंडरस्टैंड कि मुझे आगे क्या करना है.
But also fundamentally, Farhad, like you have to think, अगर आपकी लाइफ में कोई प्रॉब्लम है,
हाँ.
there's already a solution out there.
True.
Because usually we're not dealing with things like we're going to Mars or Venus.
Ah.
Those are problems nobody has solved.
True.
But for most cases,
Uh-huh.
life, business, money, relationships, whatever, there are books,
Uh-huh.
well documented,
Right.
well written by famous
Uh-huh.
authors, or
Uh-huh.
they have experiences for more than 30 years, 40
True.
years distilled into a book.
True.
So think of on those lines. क्योंकि मेरे को पता है मैं यहाँ पे अपनी family से भी बात करता हूँ, like cousins and things. They say, oh, books, we don't have time for. What are books? This is too much. हमारे पास पहले से है बहुत कुछ करने के लिए. But have you given it a real kind of try?
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you so much. I think आज की हमारी जो conversation है, it has to come to an end.
Yes.
And we will make sure that we talk again, because there are lots of these tangents we took and we didn't discuss them in detail. And I'm sure you have a lot to discuss there. And keep experiencing life the way you do, and keep sharing the experiences with us. So, my dear friends, this brings us to an end to this podcast, but there are a lot more podcasts coming. Keep watching and keep sharing the value you're getting from these podcasts with your friends and family. Take care.